There is a curious thing about those who are truly set apart. They do not always know it at first. They walk among others, feeling the weight of their own uniqueness, sensing that they were meant for something more, yet unable to fully grasp what that means. And then a moment comes, a whisper, a sign, a message that speaks directly to their soul, as if it had been waiting for them all along. If you are here, it is not by accident. You have been led to this moment because you are chosen. You were handpicked for a higher purpose, marked by the divine for something beyond the ordinary. The world may not understand you. Some may even mock or resist the light within you. But that is the way of all who walk a path that others cannot yet see. The time has come to embrace the truth of who you are. The journey will not be easy, but it will be worth it. For you were never meant to blend in, you were meant to shine. The call of the chosen. It is no accident that you are here. The world tells you that life is a series of coincidences, but you know better. Something has always set you apart, a whisper in the depths of your soul, a fire that would not be extinguished. You have felt it since childhood, that quiet certainty that you were meant for something more. You are not alone. Many before you have felt the same stirring, the same holy discontent. Moses stood before a burning bush that did not burn, hearing his name called from the flames. Samuel lay in the darkened temple when God's voice broke the night's silence. Mary, a simple girl from Nazareth, found herself face to face with an angel who spoke of a destiny beyond comprehension. They were chosen, not because they were strong, not because they were wise, but because they were willing. Now, the call has come to you. The world may try to convince you otherwise. It will tell you that faith is folly, that miracles are myths, that you are just another soul adrift in a sea of chance. But deep down, you know the truth. You have felt the unseen hand guiding you, the divine breath stirring within you. You have seen the fingerprints of God in the details of your life, in the moments too perfectly timed to be coincidence. You are not forgotten. You are not overlooked. You are chosen. To be chosen is not a burden, it is a gift. But it is a gift that demands courage. The road ahead will not be easy. The forces that once sought to silence the prophets and crucify the Christ still move against those who dare to shine in the darkness. Yet you were made for this. Every trial you have endured, every tear you have shed, has prepared you for this moment. You were not called to blend in, you were called to stand apart. Do not wait for another sign. The signs have already come. The gentle nudging in your heart, the moments of inexplicable peace, the way the right words have reached you exactly when you needed them. All of it was God calling you, drawing you nearer, preparing you for something beyond what you can now see. You may wonder, but what is my purpose? That is the great adventure of faith. Abraham did not know where he was going, only that he had to go. Peter did not know what walking on water would require, only that he had to step out of the boat. The details will unfold as you walk forward. What matters is that you go. So rise, chosen one. The world needs you, the broken, the weary, the lost. They are waiting for the light you carry. Do not let fear hold you back. The one who calls you is faithful, and he will equip you for all he asks of you. Step forward in faith. Step forward in courage. Step forward knowing that you are not walking alone. You have been called. Now will you answer? Handpicked for a higher purpose. The wind howled through the olive trees, their branches twisting like outstretched hands reaching toward heaven. In the quiet of the night, a young shepherd named Elias knelt on the rocky soil, gazing at the stars. He had always felt different, as though an unseen force was guiding his steps. His father called him a dreamer, his brothers mocked him for his endless questions about the nature of God, and the villagers whispered that he was peculiar. But deep within, Elias knew he was meant for something more. One evening, while tending his flock near the hills of Bethlehem, Elias saw a light unlike any he had ever encountered. It was not the golden hue of the sun, nor the silver gleam of the moon. It pulsed with a warmth that stirred his very soul. Then came a voice, gentle yet commanding. "Elias, son of the dust, you have been chosen." Terror gripped him, but something stronger, an inexplicable peace, overwhelmed his fear. "Who speaks to me?" he called, his voice trembling. The light grew, revealing the figure of an angel, clothed in brilliance beyond earthly comprehension. "You were handpicked for a higher purpose. Though others do not understand you, though they mock and discourage you, you must walk the path set before you. A time of blessing, growth, and transformation awaits." Elias fell to his knees, unworthy of such a message. "But I am just a shepherd," he whispered. "Why would the Most High choose me?" The angel smiled. "Did he not choose David, a shepherd like you, to become king? Did he not call Moses, a man slow of speech, to deliver his people? God's ways are higher than yours, and his plans beyond human understanding." A great stirring ignited in Elias's heart. The angel extended a hand, and when Elias reached forward, the vision faded. He was alone once more. Yet, he was not the same. Something had shifted within him, a certainty that could not be shaken. Days passed, and Elias spoke of his encounter, but few believed him. Dreams and visions they scoffed, a shepherd boy seeking attention. Doubt clawed at his faith. Had he imagined it all? Yet, each night when he looked up at the stars, he heard the echo of the angel's words. "You were hand-picked for a higher purpose." One fateful day, as he led his flock through a narrow valley, he heard the desperate cries of a traveler. Rushing toward the sound, he found a man wounded, beaten by robbers. Blood stained his robes, and his breath was shallow. Elias knelt beside him, remembering the story of the Good Samaritan, a tale often told but seldom lived. Ignoring the warnings of impurity and fear, he tore a piece of his own garment, binding the man's wounds. With great effort, he lifted him onto his shoulders and carried him toward the nearest village. As he entered the town, people gasped. "Why waste your strength on a stranger?" they asked. Elias met their gazes with unwavering resolve. "Because he is my neighbor, and I was chosen to love as he loves." The words did not come from himself, but from the certainty that had been growing within him since the angel's visit. That night, as Elias sat by the stranger's side, he understood. His purpose was not grand in the eyes of men, but it was divine in the sight of God. His calling was not to seek greatness, but to be faithful in the small, unseen acts of love and mercy. Many seek miracles, signs, and wonders, yet the true chosen recognize that the greatest calling is to walk humbly in obedience. Elias had entered a season of transformation, not in power or wealth, but in a heart attuned to the whispers of God. And so he continued his journey, not as one seeking recognition, but as one who had already been seen by the Most High. If this story stirs something within you, it is because the message was meant for you. You are not forgotten. You are chosen. Stay until the end, for your season of blessing and transformation is near. The Chosen One, embracing your divine uniqueness. Eli had always felt like an outsider. In the village where he grew up, people moved in harmony, like the gears of a well-oiled machine. But Eli, he was different. While others took pride in their work, their traditions, their sameness, he questioned, he wondered, he sought something more. The elders called him strange. The children whispered about his odd ways, and even his own family often looked at him with puzzled concern. One evening, as he sat by the river, skipping stones and contemplating his place in the world, a voice, gentle yet powerful, echoed through the silence. "Eli, why do you doubt what I have placed within you?" Startled, he turned, but saw no one. "Who's there?" he called out. The voice, calm and unwavering, replied, "I am the one who formed you. I have called you by name. Do you not know that you are chosen?" Eli's heart pounded. "Chosen? How? For what? I do not belong here. I do not fit in." "Ah," the voice said, "but to be chosen often means to stand apart." Did Moses fit in with Pharaoh's court? Did David match the stature of his brothers? Did Esther belong in the palace of a foreign king? Eli was silent, recalling the stories he had heard since childhood. Each of them had been set apart, not because they were like everyone else, but because they were different. Your uniqueness is not a flaw, the voice continued. It is your calling. You see the world not as it is, but as it could be. That is a gift. Do not let the world convince you that your rarity is a weakness. It is the very proof of your purpose. The words settled into Eli's heart like a seed planted in rich soil. He had spent his life longing to belong, to blend in, to be just another face in the crowd. But what if he was never meant to? What if his questions, his hunger for something greater, were not curses but divine markers pointing him toward his purpose? But Lord, he whispered, what if I fail? What if I am too weak, too small, too uncertain? A warm breeze swept through the trees, rustling the leaves like a divine whisper. Do you think I make mistakes? If I have called you, I will equip you. I do not choose based on what the world sees. I choose based on the heart. Eli closed his eyes, letting the truth settle in. The world may have called him strange, different, an outcast, but God called him chosen, a rare gem, a vessel for something greater. When he rose from the riverbank, he was no longer the same. He walked with purpose, with the quiet confidence of one who knows his worth is not determined by the opinions of men, but by the one who formed him. And so, Eli embraced his divine uniqueness, not as a burden, but as a calling. He would no longer seek to fit into a mold never meant for him. Instead, he would step boldly into the purpose for which he had been made. For to be chosen is not to blend in, it is to shine. The light that cannot be dimmed. Elias had always known that walking the path of faith was not meant to be easy. From the moment he declared his devotion to the Lord, the world seemed to turn against him. His family sneered, his friends scoffed, and his colleagues whispered behind his back. A fool, they called him, a dreamer blinded by superstition. But Elias knew the truth. It was not blindness but vision, a vision of something far greater than himself, something eternal. Yet, the weight of their words pressed on him like a millstone. Every insult, every laugh, every dismissive glance felt like a stone hurled against his soul. He found solace in Scripture, in the stories of those who had suffered before him. Daniel in the lion's den, David before Goliath, Paul in prison. They had all faced opposition, yet their faith had remained unshaken. One evening, as he walked home, he found himself at the edge of a familiar courtyard. It was here, years ago, that he had first encountered God's call upon his life. But tonight the air was thick with mockery. A group of old friends spotted him and called him over. "Still chasing that invisible dream, Elias?" one of them sneered. "Tell us, does your God answer when you speak to him?" another laughed. Elias felt his face flush, but he held his ground. "Yes," he said calmly. "He speaks in ways you cannot hear and works in ways you cannot see." They jeered louder. "Then prove it! Let him strike us down if he is real," Elias sighed. "God is not a trickster to perform at your command. He is a father who calls to those who seek him." Elias could have argued, he could have raised his voice in defense, but instead he remembered Christ before Pilate. Silent, unwavering, he smiled. "And one day, Marcus, I hope you will see that you've been loved." The words stunned them into silence. For a moment the jeering stopped. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or curiosity. But the moment passed, and the laughter resumed. Elias turned and walked away, but this time he carried no burden. As he walked through the darkened streets, a verse echoed in his heart. "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven." It was in that moment that Elias understood. The opposition, the mockery, the rejection, they were not signs of his failure, but of his purpose. The darkness would always try to snuff out the light, but the light could not be dimmed. It was not his to protect, but God's to shine. And so he walked on, not broken, but strengthened, knowing that he was being prepared for something far greater than the world could ever understand. The trial of Gideon's heart. Gideon had always been a man of humble beginnings. Raised in a small village where every neighbor knew the other's troubles, He had once been surrounded by friends who cheered him on. But when the Lord placed his calling upon Gideon, those same friends turned away, their smiles fading into whispers, their encouragement twisting into envy. "Who does he think he is?" they murmured. "A mere farmer, suddenly claiming the Lord has chosen him?" Others laughed openly. Surely if God had spoken, he would have chosen someone greater than Gideon. At first, the weight of their words pressed upon him. He could still remember when they had walked the fields together, dreaming of better days. Now, their faces were clouded with suspicion, their laughter laced with scorn. Yet in the quiet of the night, as Gideon sought refuge in prayer, the Lord's voice resounded within him. "Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1:9. Strengthened by this divine assurance, Gideon pressed forward, but the mockery grew louder. Some of his closest friends openly ridiculed him, disguising their jealousy in bitter jests. "What great warrior of God hides in a winepress?" they sneered, recalling how he had threshed wheat in secrecy. The words stung, yet Gideon understood. Their ridicule was not truly about him, but about their own fears. Envy often takes root in those who see another rise while they remain still. Their scorn was but a veil for their own doubts, their own reluctance to step into faith. Gideon, however, knew that his path was not his own, it was God's. And so, he did not answer their taunts with anger, but with steadfast resolve. As his journey continued, the crowd of doubters thinned. Some friends, unwilling to see him succeed, walked away entirely. Others, too proud to admit their jealousy, simply faded into silence. But the absence of their voices only made room for something greater: the presence of God, the fulfillment of his promise. When the time came for Gideon to lead, the Lord did not send him with thousands, but with 300 faithful men. The victory was not his own, it was the Lord's. And as the light of dawn broke over the battlefield, those who had once mocked him stood in awe. So it is with all who follow the Lord's calling. As you rise, some will fall away, but remember this: their departure is not your loss, but a part of the divine plan. Jealousy and mockery are not measures of your worth, but of the struggles within those who cast them. Do not let their doubts become your chains. Instead, let their words be like the chaff in the wind, scattered and forgotten, while you press on toward the purpose God has laid before you. For in the end, it is not the voices of men that define you, but the voice of God who calls you by name. The fire that refines. Eliab stood on the outskirts of the city, his hands clenched into fists. The sting of rejection burned hotter than the midday sun. He had spoken the truth, yet they had laughed. He had offered wisdom, yet they had scorned him. Even his own kin had turned away. "Surely, Lord, this is not the path you have set for me," he whispered. A wind, gentle yet insistent, swept through the valley, stirring the dust at his feet. The voice in his heart spoke, not in thunder but in quiet certainty. "Gold is purified in fire. Do you wish to be strong without being tested?" He recalled the words of the prophet. "He sits as a refiner and purifier of silver. He will purify the sons of Levi and refine them like gold and silver." Perhaps rejection was not the end, but the beginning of something greater. Eliab thought of Joseph, sold by his brothers into slavery, only to rise to power and save his people. He thought of David, rejected by his own father when Samuel came looking for a king. Even the Lord himself had been despised, nailed to a cross by the very ones he came to save. With every great calling came great trials. As night fell, he wandered into the wilderness, seeking solace in the silence of the hills. The darkness pressed in, but he did not fear it. He had learned that the night was not an enemy. It merely revealed what the day had hidden. A fire burned in the distance. He approached cautiously and found an old man sitting beside the flames, his eyes reflecting wisdom born of years. "You look troubled, son," the man said. Eliab hesitated before speaking. "I have been cast aside for speaking the truth. I thought I was walking in the way of righteousness, yet I have been ridiculed and shunned." The old man nodded. "Ah, so you are walking the right path." Eliab frowned. "How can that be? Should not truth be received with joy? The man chuckled. Was it so for the prophets? Was it so for the Christ? If you speak truth, expect opposition. If you carry light, expect the darkness to resist. The question is not whether you will face rejection. It is whether you will let it define you or refine you. Eliab sat down, staring into the fire. And how does one endure the fire without being consumed? The old man smiled. By trusting the hands of the refiner. Gold does not purify itself. It submits to the fire, knowing the hands that tend it will not let it be destroyed. So it is with those whom God calls. Eliab closed his eyes, feeling the weight of those words settle deep in his soul. The rejection he had faced was not a curse, but a chisel shaping him. He would not retreat. He would not be broken. He would endure. As the fire crackled and the stars wheeled overhead, he whispered a silent prayer. Refine me, Lord, until only you remain. And in that moment, he knew he was ready, set apart for a higher purpose. The boy had always known he was different. From the moment he could understand words, he noticed how others fit into the rhythm of the world, yet he always seemed to march to a different beat. While his friends chased after fleeting trends, he found solace in ancient words, in stories of faith and truth. Why can't you just be normal, they would ask, with laughter laced with mockery. But what was normal? The prophets had not been normal. The apostles had not been normal. Even Christ himself had not conformed to the world's expectations. He dined with sinners, healed on the Sabbath, and spoke of a kingdom unseen, one that defied all human understanding. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the boy sat by the river, skipping stones across the water. His heart was heavy. He had begun to wonder if perhaps he was wrong, if he should try harder to blend in, to silence the voice that called him to something greater. Then, as if in response to his unspoken plea, a voice, gentle yet firm, echoed in his heart. I have set you apart. His breath caught. He looked around, but he was alone. And yet, the words settled deep within him, stirring something he had long feared to embrace. Purpose. He thought of Noah, who built an ark while the world scoffed, of Moses, who stammered yet stood before Pharaoh, of David, a shepherd boy chosen to be king. They had been different. They had been misunderstood, and yet they had been called. The world has always tried to mold people into its image, to define what is acceptable, what is admirable, what is worthy. But God does not call his children to conformity. He calls them to transformation. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12 verse 2. Great leaders, inventors, and visionaries throughout history were not celebrated for their sameness but for their distinction. They were mocked before they were admired, rejected before they were revered. The very thing that set them apart was the thing that led them to their destiny. The boy clenched his fist, a spark of courage igniting within him. He would no longer apologize for the way he was made. He would no longer shrink to fit into a world that was never meant to define him. Jesus did not call his followers to comfort. He called them to courage, to stand firm when the world shakes, to walk by faith when the path is unclear, to trust that the potter does not make mistakes in his design. So, to the one who feels out of place, to the one who feels different, rejoice, for you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to stand out. Your difference is not a curse but a calling. It is the mark of the one who has set you apart for something greater than you can yet see. And when the world asks, why can't you just be normal? Smile and remember, because normal was never the goal. Trusting God's plan, even when it's unclear. Elijah stood at the edge of the great desert, the sun sinking below the horizon, casting long golden shadows over the sand. His heart weighed heavy with uncertainty. God had called him to this journey, yet every step forward felt like walking deeper into an abyss. Had he misheard? Had he misunderstood? The silence of the wilderness offered no answers. He thought of Abraham, called to leave everything he knew for a land unseen. Of Joseph, sold into slavery before rising to power. Of Moses, standing before the Red Sea with no escape in sight. Each of them had once stood where he now stood, in the unknown, faced with the impossible. And yet, God had been faithful. Would he not be faithful now? Elijah knelt in the dust, whispering a prayer into the wind. "Lord, I do not see the way, but I know you do. Help me trust." A whisper, not of the wind, but of something deeper, stirred in his soul. Every step matters, even when you cannot see the whole path. He rose, brushing the dust from his robe, and pressed forward. Days passed, the journey growing more difficult. The water in his skin bag dwindled, the heat pressed upon him like an iron hand. Each morning he awoke with the same question. "Why did you bring me here, Lord?" Each evening the silence was his only answer. One night, exhausted and parched, he collapsed beside a crumbling rock. "Lord, I cannot go any further." As sleep overtook him, he dreamed. In the dream he saw a great tapestry, threads woven in patterns too vast to comprehend. Some threads were dark, some gleamed like gold. He traced a single strand with his fingers. It twisted, tangled, disappeared for long stretches, only to re-emerge in a radiant design beyond anything he could have imagined. "Every piece matters," a voice echoed, "even the ones that seem out of place." Elijah awoke with the taste of morning air cool on his lips. A few steps ahead, nestled in the rock, was a small spring trickling with fresh water. He drank deeply, the life returning to his weary limbs. The journey was not over, but his heart was steady now. He did not need to know every step, he needed only to trust the one who did. The furnace of affliction, strength forged in trial. Isaac had never known the warmth of a loving home. His father, a man consumed by ambition, saw him as little more than an inconvenience, and his mother, weary from years of silence, offered no refuge. His older brothers ridiculed him, calling him weak and foolish for clinging to his faith. If family was meant to be a source of love and support, Isaac had been cast into the wrong household. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Isaac sat alone under the great oak tree beyond his family's land. He had stolen away from the house, tired of the relentless storm of words meant to crush his spirit. "Perhaps they are right," he whispered into the wind. "Perhaps I am nothing." Then a voice, quiet but firm, stirred within him. "You are mine." Isaac's breath caught in his throat. He had heard the scriptures read at the temple. He had listened to the stories of Moses, of David, of Joseph, men whose families had forsaken them, yet who were strengthened by God. But never before had he truly believed that the same God who parted the seas and guided kings would speak to him. That night, Isaac knelt by his small bed and prayed as he never had before. "Lord, if my family rejects me, be my refuge. If they do not love me, let your love be enough." Days turned into weeks, and though his family remained unchanged, Isaac found himself growing stronger. The insults that once cut deep now washed over him like rain upon stone. He sought solace in the words of Scripture. "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." Psalm 27:10. One day his father fell gravely ill. The household, usually filled with shouting and disdain, grew quiet with fear. His brothers, so sure of their strength, were helpless. Physicians came and went, but his father only worsened. Isaac prayed, not just in the secrecy of his room, but openly, before them all. "God, I do not know why you placed me in this family, but I know you do not make mistakes. If it is your will, heal my father, and if not, give me the strength to endure." For the first time in his life, his family did not mock him for his faith. They watched as he fasted, as he read from the ancient scrolls, as he sought the God they had long ignored. On the third day, his father's fever broke. His brothers stood in stunned silence. His mother wept, and his father, for the first time, looked at Isaac not with disdain, but with something resembling awe. "I have spent my life believing strength came from power, from control, from bending others to my will," his father murmured. "But you are stronger than any of us. And it is not because of you, but because of the one who holds you. From that day forward, Isaac was no longer the outcast, no longer the weak one. He had found his strength not in the approval of men, but in the embrace of God, and in doing so, he became the pillar his family never knew they needed. For what they had sought in pride and failed to grasp, he had found in humility and faith. Because sometimes the family that rejects you is the very reason you learn to rely on God alone. Walking in your divine truth, Elias stood at the edge of the valley, the wind pressing against his face like an unseen force testing his resolve. Below, the city stretched in all directions, a sea of restless souls, each fighting battles invisible to the world. He had always known that walking in truth would not be easy, but he had never expected the weight of rejection to press so heavily upon him. "You are a fool to believe in such things," they had told him. "God's ways are a crutch for the weak. Make your own destiny." Yet, Elias knew better. He had seen too much, felt too deeply the guiding hand of the one who formed the stars. The road to truth was narrow and filled with obstacles, but every hardship was a chisel, carving him into the man he was meant to be. He thought of Joseph, sold into slavery by his own brothers, yet rising to power through unwavering faith. He recalled David, mocked even by his own kin before he stood before Goliath, armed not with strength but with certainty in the Lord. And above all, he remembered Christ, ridiculed and betrayed, yet steadfast in love and truth. People misunderstood because they wrestled with their own shadows. Their words were not truly about him, but reflections of their inner struggles. Elias had learned this lesson many times, through pain, through loneliness, through the temptation to abandon his calling. But now, standing here on the precipice of doubt and faith, he knew what he must do. Turning from the valley, he walked forward, not away from the city, but toward it. He would not shrink from the purpose God had set before him. Every mockery, every rejection, every hardship would be another stone beneath his feet, lifting him higher. "Your destiny is uniquely yours," Elias whispered to himself, recalling the words that had been seared into his heart. "Do not let the expectations of others define your journey." His mind turned to the Apostle Paul, once Saul, a man who had been blind until the Lord opened his eyes. He had endured scorn, imprisonment, and the lashes of his enemies, yet he pressed on, not for the approval of men, but for the glory of the one who called him. God's plan transcends human understanding, Elias thought. I will walk in it, even if I walk alone. The wind had not ceased its howling, nor had the road before him grown smoother, but a quiet strength filled him now, steady and unshakable. One step, then another, then another. And as he walked, he knew he was not alone. You were never meant to blend in. From the beginning, you were set apart, chosen for a purpose that goes beyond the understanding of those around you. The struggles you have faced, the rejection you have endured, and the loneliness you have felt were never signs of failure. They were signs of preparation. Do not be disheartened by those who misunderstand or oppose you. Their voices are but whispers against the call of the one who has set you on this path. The trials you have endured were never meant to break you, but to refine you, like gold in the fire, until you shine with the radiance of your true calling. So walk forward with courage. You are not alone, nor are you lost. The path ahead may not always be clear, but the one who called you will guide your every step. Trust, believe, and step boldly into the destiny that has been waiting for you all along.